So the Greens will continue to oppose this bill.
I call Mark Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, it's a pleasure to take a call on this bail amendment bill. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge Ministers Collins, Tolley and Burrows. The three ministers are achieving great results in our criminal justice sector, and I'd like to acknowledge them. I'd also like to acknowledge the committee. I'd like to acknowledge our chair, Jackie Dean, who's done a very, very good job chairing the committee and hearing the submissions on this bill. I'd like to acknowledge the Honourable Phil Goff and Chris Farfoy, David Clendon and Richard Prosser from New Zealand First, and of course my own colleagues Jamie Lee Ross, Lindsay Tish and Ian McKelvey, or you, Mr Speaker. It was actually quite a difficult bill to debate and for the committee to have in front of it, because obviously it deals with victims of crime, and we had a lot of brave submitters come along to the committee and make submissions. They were deeply personal. Some of them had been victims of crime, others had been supporting families and friends that have been victims of serious crime. But it was actually really important for us as a committee to hear submissions like that, because we can sometimes live in a bit of a sterile world down here in Parliament in Wellington, and actually to have submissions like that, to hear submissions like that, allows us to really get focused and understand how law changes can really affect people in the community and our victims. Look, I listened to what Mr Goff said, and I understand that as part of their role they do a fair bit of work in trying to analyse and work out how much of a real impact this is going to make. And he talks about often this bill just sort of operates and touches around the margins. But, you know, I just can't buy that. I think that, personally, that if we can prevent one other Kiwi or New Zealander from becoming a victim of a serious crime, then it's our duty and our role to make sure that we pass a law that can stop that happening. Mr Speaker, I do have to take a short call, and so I'm going to get to the crux of the bill that I think is a very, very part of it, very important part of it, and that is one of the main provisions, which is around reversing the burden of proof. So the bill will reverse the burden of proof in bail decisions for those charged with serious Class A drug offences, such as manufacturing or dealing in P, as more than a third of defendants arrested for serious Class A drug offences actually offend while they're still out on bail. Reverse the burden of proof in bail decisions for defendants charged with murder. Obviously, murder is the most serious offence in New Zealand law currently, but is subject to the same test, is currently subject to the same test for bail as other less serious offences. So this obviously was a no-brainer. This had to be corrected. We've made the change to reflect the seriousness of the charge of murder. The current list of specified offences has not been reviewed since the Bail Act was enacted. It does not reflect the risk posed by defendants charged with other serious violent and sexual offenders who have a history of serious offending. So these were very, very important changes to make, to actually put the onus of proof back on the defendant, to put it back on them to ensure that they could show a judge or a court that they are not going to be a danger, that they are not going to re-offend against the community. The bill also expands the list of violent and sexual offences that result in a defendant being subject to a reverse burden of proof if they have a prior history of such offending. And we only have to read our papers or watch the television or turn the radio on to understand that, sadly, communities are still at risk and exposed to these offenders who are habitual re-offenders. And this bill is going to strengthen the laws around them actually being able to be granted bail with this reverse burden of proof. Mr Speaker, this is a very good bill, and I'm very happy to commend it to the House. Thank you.
I call Richard Prosser.